Welcome to episode 313 of the DFO Rundown, brought to you by Bet365. Of course, our betting partner in the playoffs and beyond. You can get all the news, analysis, lines, and betting options for the playoffs until one team is left standing. The Edmonton Oilers need 3 wins. We'll see if they can extend the series tomorrow. Take your odds at bet365.com and use the promo code DAILY365. I'm Jason Gregory. Welcome in Frank Saravalli. And Frank, for a game, the Oilers gave their faithful a reason to believe that the unlikely is possible.
It's still very unlikely.
Well, yeah,
and that's kind of the amazing part about how game 4 played out. I mean, if you said the Oilers were going to win, yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone would be shocked by that development. But to win 8-1, no one had that on their bingo card. Come on. And that's kind of the amazing part about how lopsided the score is we kind of get carried away. And it's not carried away in a crazy way. It's like, look, they finally broke Sergei Bobrovsky, like quite literally put him on the bench 25 minutes into the game. So for a team that had been talking about generating quality looks and chances and not converting, well, the dam breaks and they burst through. It doesn't break, it explodes. And now all of a sudden we're going, do we have a series here? Can they make it a series? And you're looking at, I hate the cliches, but the reason they're cliches is because there's kernels of truth in them. Now they're 1 win away from forcing the Florida Panthers to really start to smell themselves a bit and go back to Edmonton for game 6. But if you were to stop and take a second and think about it from Florida's angle, they're heading home up 3-1 with a chance to close it out on home ice. I mean, the only better situation than 3-0 is 3-1. So the lopsided nature of the score could make them lose themselves a little bit. But if you refocus and the 2 extra days between games to reset mentally, it's a pretty unbelievable opportunity for the Panthers.
Oh yeah, it's massive. And it's funny though, is momentum a thing? It doesn't necessarily seem to be. Sometimes in this playoffs, we've seen teams, play great and then has nothing the next game that resembles what happened in the previous game. And we've seen that in other series. What's interesting about the Oilers series now is if you look at the numbers, all of a sudden, like in small sample sizes, things change drastically. Stuart Skinner has a better goals against average in the series now than Sergei Bobrovsky. And you know what?
Now the goals in the series on the aggregate are tied.
Yes. Well, yes, they are tied, but there's 2 empty net goals for Florida. So goalies in goal. Actually, Edmonton's outscored them out enough, but that's what happens when you have one.
When you have such a lopsided game, right?
Yeah. So, and they've had now. If you're Edmonton, you say, hey, after not scoring in the first 2 games, we've scored 11 goals in the last 2 games. So but now it goes back to Florida where they couldn't score, and they did have chances, but they couldn't score. And so, I think Edmonton, it gives them a little bit of belief. And belief can be powerful. And I really think, Frank, just like I thought in game 4, the first period is going to be crucial. And it's funny how one play could change everything. Like, what if Reinhart doesn't hit the goalpost on the power play early in that game? Right?
Well, twice in the same shift. And then on the same shift, like it's an unbelievable sequence. You hit 2 posts, and then down the other end of the ice, Janmark scores a shorty.
Oh, yeah. And then changed everything
without a stoppage in between.
Yeah.
And on the whole, I would say that's the funniest part about game 1 is the Oilers had a 3-1 lead at the end of 1, but they were actually probably outplayed. Florida had the better play on the balance. That's the wackiest part of game 4.
Yeah, well, Stuart Skinner actually made some big saves. I know when you win 8-1, it didn't get talked about, but he actually made some huge stops. The 2-on-1 save on Verhaeghe when it was the 2-on-1 when it was 2-1 for Edmonton. That was massive. And so, there's no there's no rhyme or reason to look other than, Edmonton makes people say, well, maybe they can score in Bobrovsky, right? Because they chased him on 8 goals. If you go from the third period to the early in the second period of game 4, and they scored 8 goals on him. And I just think mentally for any group, there's lots more players now that go into the game thinking, oh, you know what? Maybe he doesn't look like the Michelin man in goal for me anymore. And I think he might have beforehand.
Well, I think he was 100% in their heads. I mean, he was nearly flawless, 953 save percentage, and that includes the couple goals that were given up in the third period of game 3. I mean, prior to that last period, he was, I think, in the 970s of game 3. That's for a, 8-period stretch. That's about as daunting as it gets, even for maybe some of the best offensive players of their generation. It does change everything. And I had an NHL coach right before the game, game 4. He said to me, if there's one team in the league that can actually pull this off, it's the Edmonton Oilers. And
because they have McDavid and McDavid just we'll get to it in a second. But yeah, basically saying because of their offensive potential.
No, not necessarily. I actually messaged him I'll read it to you. I messaged him during the game. What made you say that today? If anyone could pull off 4 straight, it's this one. What makes you think that? And I'll read you his message. He said a few things. That team has looked adversity square in the eye over the past 12 months, going back to getting punted by Vegas, and then all the stuff this year. Being down 3 isn't going to phase them. Beating the 2 best players in the world 4 times is extremely difficult. I think the Oilers have been unlucky in this series. Goalie Bob has been excellent, but his save percentage is not sustainable. And lastly, they can win games on their power play alone.
Yeah, well, he makes sense.
That's kind of the amazing thing. If you're sitting here from an Oilers perspective, you sit here and go, okay, well, Hyman and Nugent Hopkins really haven't shown up yet. Draisaitl has been super quiet, even including the game 4 win.
Yep.
And he said after the game, I still have more to give. And then we have yet to see the Oilers power play make a difference. They're 1 for 16 in the series. Any one of those one things is enough to win one game, you would think.
Well, yeah. And it's funny. So the Oilers have had 10 guys score goals so far in this series, and Draisaitl and Hyman aren't involved in that. And so you would think that eventually your 2 leading goal scorers are going to score a goal at some point. Now, if they don't, then they're probably not going to win. But the odds benefit them. Now, if you're the Florida Panthers, we talk about guys who haven't really stepped up offensively. You have to think the Panthers are looking and say, well, you know what? Here we are. We're up 3-1. And our leading scorer in the regular season has all but 1 assist in the series and is -3. We think he can show up, and Matt Tkachuk can be much better than we've seen through 4 games.
What is up with Tkachuk? Like, how come when we have the Conn Smyth conversation, he's not even in it? This is the guy that's the straw that stirs their drink. What's going on with him? Why hasn't he been more productive? Why hasn't he been more impactful?
Like, honestly, when he got in that scrum with McDavid and gave him the rabbit punches, and I said, hey, honestly, that's the first time I've really noticed Tkachuk in the series. Like, honestly, you haven't seen him, making a lot of great plays. Yeah, obviously hasn't scored a goal. He did hit the crossbar in the first period, but other than that, Frank, you're right. He has been, for him, I think it's like, to me, he's in the same boat as Hyman and Draisaitl. It's been a quiet series for Tkachuk. It hasn't got talked about as much because they were winning. And usually when you're winning, it's like, hey, well, we don't really care about it. But, and that's the advantage they have. Florida can say, you know what? He's been pretty quiet and we're still up 3-1. So the odds would say he's going to show up at some point. And if he does, then that increases our chances of winning.
Yeah, if he does, good night.
Yeah. Why he hasn't, though? I don't really know. It hasn't. It's
been a really weird year for him.
Yeah.
In general.
Early on, I think because of this, coming off the surgery and everything, it takes players a while, probably more than we think. And I think that's part of it. But then he came on. He had a really good second half of the season. He was excellent. And in the first 3 rounds of the playoffs, he was pretty good for Florida. I think he led him in scoring. He had 19 points through 3 rounds. You'd be pretty happy with that.
I mean, I'm still surprised that Hyman isn't on the board.
Yeah, they need him, right? Like
he's the leading goal scorer in the entire playoffs by 40%.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have one in the Cup final. It's just surprising. So it depends
totally.
on which side of the coin which lens you're looking at it from. But you could make really concrete arguments either way.
So what do you think happens in game 5? Like, do the Panthers, do we see a game like game 2 was, we've seen 2 games that were pretty close that probably games 1 and 3 probably should have been split realistically. Mm-hmm. And then game 2 was clearly Florida dominating and game 4 was obviously Edmonton dominating. So what's your expectations for game 5?
I think the Panthers empty the tank. I think you empty the clip and do everything you can to avoid going back to Edmonton for game 6. Because if you go back to Edmonton for game 6, I think you're in big trouble. I think if you go to Edmonton for 6, you're coming back to Florida for 7.
Yeah. And we've seen teams lately push it who are down 3-0, push it to 7, but not be able to get that one. So it would be a great storyline, and I think Connor Brown said it after the game, goes, yeah, that would be the most Oilery thing that we've done this year, right? Is to extend this series and come back. I will say to the players I spoke to that it's one game, right? Like they didn't,
they weren't over enthused by the 8-1, or they weren't swayed by that. But I could tell you that they did feel good though. 15 different guys getting on the score sheet. It's not, it wasn't, get your cookies night, but just a confidence perspective of, hey, this guy isn't so scary. We can beat him if we continue to stick with it. That it's one thing to say it. It's another thing to experience it, because how many times do we hear the cliches of, oh man, we're getting the looks, we're getting the chances, we're just not finishing. I think that was actually true this time around, because they did have great looks in games 1 and 3 that they just didn't convert on. And now all of a sudden, when you go out and do it and then do it in that fashion, that's what really changes the perspective.
Well, you have 7 different goal scorers. And as we mentioned earlier, none of them were the big dogs. So your depth guys are feeling good about themselves, which is obviously nice. But they still, Connor McDavid excluded, of course, because he's got 7 points now in the series in 4 games. And how about McDavid, Frank? He just broke Wayne Gretzky's record for most assists in one playoff year. They're the only 2 men on the planet to ever have 30 assists. David has 32. Gretzky had 31 and 30. Now, Gretzky had 47 points, but McDavid's alongside Lemieux and Gretzky as the only guys to ever have 38 points in a playoff year. And if they can extend this to 6, it looks really likely that he'll get into the 40s, right? Which, of course, is only Gretzky and Lemieux territory. Gretzky's done it 3 times. Lemieux did it once. It's quite the year. So I wonder, at what point do you think, let's say Edmonton loses in 6 games and McDavid has 42 points. Could he be the Conn Smyth?
Can he be? Of course. Let's look at the Conn Smyth from a holistic perspective, though, because I think, and it's not a guarantee because we don't know how the rest of the series is going to shape out, but I think Sergei Bobrovsky cost himself the Conn Smyth.
Because of one game?
Well, here's how I look at it. I was really on the fence between Bobrovsky and Barkov before. But when you have someone that has been consistently excellent the whole way through, like Bob was only okay through the first 2 rounds. It was round 3 that he was lights out. And then lights out to start the Cup final. And so that's the tough part about the conversation, is that it's playoff MVP, not Stanley Cup Final MVP. But when you get yanked and you do it like that, yeah, I mean, why should Barkov hasn't had that hiccup? Why should he not be in the mix?
Okay. I guess my question for Barkov is, what has Barkov done that makes him so obviously the dominant guy for Florida, though?
Let me tell
He's
you
fifth.
this. Well, okay. So
He's fifth on their team in 5-on-5 scoring, right? Like he leads their team with
it's
21
not
points.
about point production. It's about what they haven't let in. And I think that that's more of
But
a
he's
product
12-9, 5-on-5.
I just, can I make the argument first, or are you going to defeat it before I get there?
Go ahead.
Round one. What did Nikita Kucherov do? Lined up head to head against Barkov. Nothing. What did David Pastrnak do in round two? 1 goal. What did the top guns from the New York Rangers do in round 3? Nothing. What up until game 4 did any of the top guns from the Edmonton Oilers do? Nothing. At some point, that's not all just on the goalie. At some point, that's on the guy that's playing the heavy minutes against the top competition. What he does at the other end of the ice, in my opinion, is just a bonus. I think he's far and away the most complete player. And his resume through all 4 rounds is sparkling.
Now, I'm just going to compare. So to counter that, so you mentioned those guys, and it's valid points. They haven't scored very much. But you know who
It can't all just be an accident that they all aren't scoring much.
No. I don't discount it, but just wait. But do you know who's playing way more minutes against all those guys and they're not scoring? Gustav Forsling. Right? Gustav Forsling played 47 minutes against Kucherov. Barkov played 27. Right? Barkov played against Zibanejad 49. It was 55 for Forsling. Pastrnak played 36 against Barkov, 52 against Forsling. Forsling's the guy who's playing
all
way
you're
more
telling me
minutes
are defensive splits. Defensemen spend way more time on the ice than forwards.
Right.
Give me the numbers again from the round 3 against Zibanejad.
55 for Forsling and 49 for
Yeah, okay. That's just the difference between a defenseman being on the ice more than a forward. Okay.
Yeah, that's
what
but
was
it's
it, round
47-27 in Kucherov
okay, but
in 5 games.
Okay, but Tampa also has more than one weapon. How much time has he spent shorthanded against those teams? Like, and the Pastrnak split to me is not really any different than round 3. So, if anything, you made my argument for me, I feel like.
Well, I disagree. Forsling's playing more against them and not getting scored. Like, I don't know. Like, I looked at Barkov. Everybody raved about his series against the Rangers. Oh, he didn't give up much. He was on the ice for 1 goal for in the entire series. 1 goal for, 1 goal against. So that's like, those aren't, oh my God, I can't believe somebody just did that. Like, they weren't that great. He didn't score and he didn't get scored on. It was even. Like,
they trounced the New York Rangers.
Yeah, the other guys did, not so much Barkov. That's all I'm saying. Like,
but you don't even have an opportunity to win unless you shut down the other team's best guys. I don't understand your argument.
Well, what do you mean? But he didn't. But you still have to score, right? You still have to score.
That's not his job. Look at their scoring numbers from the regular season. That's not his job.
All right. I'll disagree with it. I think people are like, oh my God, he's been so dominant. But when you dig into the numbers, it's not being that crazy dominant. Like in the playoffs, he's 12 goals for, 9 goals against. Like, you know, being +3, 5-on-5 to me isn't like this guy's a dominant automatic Conn Smyth.
So what's he done shorthanded? How many key faceoffs has he won? I mean, it's as complete as it gets. I don't think you have a full appreciation if you're just looking at it from that lens of all the little things that he does to put that team in a position to succeed.
Oh, I don't discount he does, but to me, goalie Bob had 1 meh game. I don't know. He stood on his head time after time on many power plays where the Rangers had unreal looks and Bob just stoned him. So I don't know if I say, wait, those guys were limiting their looks. No, the goalie was stopping the great looks.
Okay, so what was Sergei Bobrovsky's save percentage against the Tampa Bay Lightning in round 1? Do you want to guess?
I have no idea. Well, I know the first 3, he allowed like 4 goals in some of those games.
896 for 5 games. So sub 900. Okay. Then he goes to Boston. What was his save percentage against them? 907. So for the first 2 rounds, Sergei Bobrovsky was 902. The first half of the playoffs. 902 is sub-league average for the regular season. Does that scream Conn Smyth to you? Then throw in the clunker against the Oilers in Game 4? I'm sorry, his resume is not bulletproof.
Yeah, well, I agree, but neither is Barkov's. That's all I'm saying.
On the balance, I'm taking the guy who for 4 rounds consistently has shut down some of the best players in the world. He's given up, you just said it, in 4 rounds, he's given up 9 goals against at even strength against the best players in the world. Kucherov, Pasternak, Zibanejad. Now pick your poison against the Oilers. Who's he played more against, McDavid or Draisaitl?
Let me look. Oh, that's penalty kill. I'll get back to 5-on-5 here. I think he's played more against McDavid.
Pretty impressive, if you ask me. Forsling's on my ballot somewhere if the Panthers win.
Yeah, like honestly, I think Forsling's a guy who probably gets overlooked. I think he's been pretty unreal.
He's part of the top 3. But now your question was, to get back to it, was about McDavid.
Now, what's interesting, like he played more minutes against Morgan Geekie than Pasternak, though. So in Boston series,
Morgan Geekie was their top line center.
Yeah. Which, no offense, but that's, you know what I mean? Like it's.
But who did Morgan Geekie center? David Pasternak.
Right. But I just think, you know, sometimes it's easier to neuter a guy when, you know, you're not having a top line center, right? Like I thought the neutering Kreider as Zibanejad was much more impressive because Zibanejad's a pretty productive centerman. Morgan Geekie's not on anybody's list of hard to shut down.
Oh, okay. Sure. It's not about the center. It's about one of the most dangerous wingers on the planet and him shutting him down. But okay. So your question is McDavid. Here's the tougher part about McDavid. We know what the points are. We know what the NHL single postseason record that he now holds, breaking one of Wayne Gretzky's 58 records for most assists in a single postseason, now with 32. The tough part about the McDavid campaign is, like you, I've been around the Oilers almost the whole playoffs, and through 3 rounds, I would say that if you were to ask someone who has been the Oilers MVP, Connor McDavid would be 3rd on the list. True or false? It would be Draisaitl 1 and then Bouchard 2 through 3 rounds.
Well, I threw 2. I had him at 2. I thought the 3rd round McDavid against Dallas started to take over at times. Was much better.
So, but you would have had him 2 though.
I had him behind Draisaitl after the first round was Draisaitl. Second round was kind of close. 3rd round, I thought McDavid was the best order in the 3rd round.
Okay. All right. Well, I see these people chime in on social media like, oh man, McDavid should win the Conn Smyth. It's like, tell me you haven't watched the Oilers this playoffs. I'm not saying he's been bad at all. Obviously, that's not the case. It's impossible to pile up numbers like that and say that. I just don't think he's been their most impactful player all through all 4 rounds. And that's the tough part about then voting him number 1 for Conn Smyth. How much do you weigh and balance the needs or the import of the actual cup final itself? And then the question is that enough in a losing fashion to win if that were to happen? I think you'd have to get pretty deep in this series in order for that to be a possibility.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said, like, if it's in 5, it's not a question, right? It's got to be minimum 6, maybe 7. So we'll see.
But is my read wrong, though, on him being their MVP?
Well, I think if you look at it all encompassing, if you looked at all 4 rounds now, you'd probably still put him ahead of Draisaitl really since midway part of the Dallas series hasn't done much. I don't know if he's banged up or what have you, but so he and like when Draisaitl was number 1 for the first series, it wasn't because McDavid was bad. It's just Draisaitl was really good. So that's sometimes, it's a good problem to have, I think, for those teams. But yeah, like if I went all encompassing and I just looked at all 20, what do they play? 22 games, I think. Yeah, 22. If you average it all out, it would probably be McDavid for me.
Okay.
Now, I do think recency bias because, Bouchard and Draisaitl down the stretch in Dallas and into this series haven't been remotely close.
No, Bouchard looks like he's out of gas.
Yeah, well, that was the advantage in game 4 for them is they didn't have to play any of their big guys very much.
I'm glad you said that because I meant to ask Chris Knobloch about that. Was you could kind of take your foot off the gas and rest up. And I know that's what they talked about with Bobrovsky. Okay, well, it's just extra rest.
Yes.
But it's a different kind of rest, especially mentally.
Yeah, well, no, when you get pulled in a game, like now, these guys are trained to ride the roller coaster, not get too high, not get too low. And I know it's a cliche, but it makes sense, right? Like you win 8-1 or you lose 2-1, you only get one win, right? So, could Bobrovsky come back and shut the door and be great in game 5? I wouldn't be surprised. That's why I think, though, if Edmonton can score early in the first period, Frank, that I think is the longer the game goes without goals, it benefits Florida significantly for me because that just means Bobrovsky's building momentum again.
Okay, so quickly before we get to Tyler, if you were to fill out, I don't think I can give mine because I'm a voter, but if you were to fill out a Conn Smyth ballot with heading into game 5, like not knowing what the result of it is, if you have to fill it out, it's a clinching game, so you have to fill it out.
Yes.
No matter what. Who's it going to be? What's your 3 in order?
It would be Bobrovsky, and then I would have Forsling, Barkov.
Okay. All right.
The one Conn Smyth that I always still question was when Sid beat out Phil. I thought Phil Kessel should have won the Conn Smyth.
I voted for Phil.
Yeah. Was that? No, I can't. Was that 17 or 6? I think it was 16.
I think it was 16.
Yeah. So ultimately, it doesn't matter. The guy who wins the Conn Smyth most times, like, yeah, it's a nice trophy. Let's move on. I want the cup. So I get it. Let's bring in.
Since then, by the way, we've made our votes public.
Yeah.
That was actually kind of the push. I wrote a story that was somewhat controversial after that, where I contacted all the voters and published a story tallying the votes. And then
I think it's smart. You should.
Yeah.
So, and you know what? People are allowed to disagree with someone's vote. You just have to explain why you voted it. I don't always have to agree. I'm like, all right, I can understand your rationalization. We move on, right? Like, it's not to. I think people get confused and thinking, if you put it public and you disagree with me, Tim in Nantucket, that means you're an idiot. No, it doesn't. It just means
it's not
explain why your reasoning was, and then you're like, okay, all right.
Sometimes it's obvious. This time it's not. It's kind of like our Hart Trophy race this year.
I think, the Hart will be interesting when it comes out. I'm curious to see the votes because I think this year's voting will be very across the board from lots of different people. Let's bring in Tyler Yaremchuk.
What's up, boys? I got a fresh edition of Fill in the Blank for you. It is brought to you by our friends at Wendy's. They only ever use fresh, never frozen Canadian beef in all their burgers. Whether it's a JBC, a Baconator, or a Dave Single, that beef has never seen the inside of a freezer. You can order today and check out the latest deals by downloading the Wendy's app. All right, digging into things a little bit here. Obviously, a lot of Oilers and Panthers talk today. But Frank, you had an interesting line the other day about how much it could end up costing the Oilers to extend, we'll say, all 3 of their big guns, Bouchard, McDavid, and Draisaitl. So I'm intrigued to hear your guys' answers to throw a number on it a little bit. So McDavid, Draisaitl, and Bouchard, once they're all extended, will total blank against the cap, Frank.
I said 40 million. My thought process was 16 McDavid, 14 Draisaitl, and 10 Bouchard. And that's assuming they all sign long-term, 8-year deals.
Interesting. Greg's, you want higher or lower than 40?
Well, if Edmonton could get them all on 8-year deals, they'll be doing cartwheels. I still lead to Draisaitl, McDavid, maybe looking at Austin Matthews' strategy and going shorter, but we'll see. The Bouchard one's interesting because he's an RFA, and even when his contract, like if they sign him to another bridge deal, it'd still be an RFA. So do they want
He
to?
ain't signing another bridge deal.
Yeah. Well,
Not after 82 point. Was it 82 points he had?
yeah. Well, 100%. But that's
Not
why
after an 82 point season.
I'm gonna say I had it at I think I did 13. I had 38.5
in the same range. So a little bit lower on the McDavid Draisaitl deals. Is that what the difference was?
Yeah, I think Draisaitl's. I have Draisaitl like 13.5 and McDavid at 15. But that's not saying they could easily not get the other stuff. But I know it's only a million and a half difference, but that can be like two bottom, tier guys, and they look and say, "Hey, we want to win," so whatever.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of big dollars and free agency, was going back through Frank's free agent board the other day, and I'm intrigued at not necessarily the highest AAV, but who's going to end up getting the most smoke in total. Obviously, Reinhart, Gensel are 1 and 2 on Frank's list. Stamkos is behind at 3. I don't think he'll get the AAV to be in the conversation, but the player who will get the most total dollars this year in free agency is blank, Jason.
Oh God, it's a good question.
I guess Reinhart holds a bit of an edge because he can get the 8th year from somewhere. Is that maybe what tips it?
Yeah, well, Stamkos, but he's not going to get 8 years at his age, I wouldn't think.
No.
Like Reinhart's 28. You're right. Staying with Florida, I think that gives him a distinct advantage. But if we take like who gets the hihighest AAV,
no,
because then
who's getting the highest total dollars.
No, I understand that, but he has the advantage, so I would go with Reinhart. But then I said if it was AAV, might change. But Reinhart.
It's not. There's only one answer to this question.
Is it Reinhart?
It's AAV and total dollars. It's Reinhart.
Really?
100%.
So, but see, when I was looking at it though, I was like, okay, well, like with Reinhart with the no state income tax, like what if he comes in $1.5 million shorter than Gensel?
If that was gonna happen, they would have already gotten it done.
Yeah, and
because never happened. I think they've already offered 8 times 9.5.
Yeah. See, I think Ty, one of the biggest people always repeat, oh yeah, the no state guys, they go lower. Go look at when Hedman signed, Kucherov signed, Vasilevsky.
They all were lower. Every single one of them was lower than what they should have gotten.
Really?
100%.
Vasilevsky got $9.5 million.
Not a single guy on the Tampa roster has the 10 million AAV. Guys have been signing 10 million AAV since Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves. It's 100% fact. Fact. They don't have a guy making $10 million.
Yeah, they don't have a guy making 10 mil, but they were all still in the top 5 to 7 of their position.
No,
it's not like they're taking hometown discount.
Stop. Kucherov had won the Hart Trophy and 2 Stanley Cups already. It's not no.
What do you mean? No, just go look at the number. I'm not making up the number. If you want to say it could have been 10.5, that's fine, but he's still in the top 5 of his position.
10 years now. That's how long guys have been getting $10 million AAVs. They went through an entire cycle and not a single one of the best players at their position got a 10 million AAV. It's because of no state income tax. But just because they did it doesn't mean that Reinhart's doing it.
No, well, Bobrovsky's already got 10. So Barkov's already got 10.
Yeah,
right.
Same in Florida, Tampa.
But Florida could be sitting there going, hey, we love you, Sam, but we're not paying you more than Barkov.
Well, I wouldn't.
I wouldn't either, no. Interesting. That took a bit of
a
turn.
Doesn't that... So if we're thinking, though, the next guy in line to properly answer the question, isn't the ceiling for Jake Gensel 8 times 9.5? Like, I don't think he's topping 9.5. Do you?
Now, do I think so? Yes. But free agency, Frank, all it takes is one. And we've seen it some years where you're just like, what? He got how much? So would I be stunned if somebody signed Jake Gensel with a 10 mil AAV? Not stunned because I've seen it before, but yeah, I agree with you. He should be single digits. No question. Right? Like Jake Gensel's really good, but like he's got 22nd most goal. Yeah, you're right. It's very true.
No. We're not doing that again. I'm not sitting through that again. Okay, last one I got for you guys. The group of teams out east who kind of get lumped together a little bit. You got the Sabres, Wings, Senators, and Devils is kind of that group that's trying to jump up into the playoffs next season. And I'm wondering
which one of these is not like the other.
Well, kind of in a way. Like, to me, I was gonna ask you guys which GM is facing the most heat to win the offseason. And like the way I was looking at it was like, I feel like New Jersey can actually run it back next year with like maybe just a new goalie and be like, hey, we kind of like our chances. If we get, like you said before, Frank, 905 next year, we're probably back in the playoffs. So like maybe we don't need to really overhaul this roster. But I look at a team like Ottawa and I go, you probably need to like subtract 3 guys and add in 5 guys and really overhaul things. So out of that group of teams, from the Wings, the Sabres, the Sens, and the Devils, which one is facing the most pressure to be the winner of the offseason? Greg's, I'll let you go first on this one.
Well, I'm a big believer that, the winner of the offseason usually becomes the most overhyped, because rarely do you win a lot and make a big difference in free agency. Now there's the odd one, of course, that can make a big splash for your team, but I like the Sabres defense the best right now. And I think they're the team that has a lot internally. New Jersey, obviously injuries played a factor. So I think the team that has to win offseason, I'll say Ottawa, because if Ottawa doesn't change the makeup of their blue line, I don't see how they're going to improve, because goals against, that's where they're getting killed. So they have to figure out a way to lower their goals against. And I think that's got to come via trade.
Yeah, I think it's got to come by fixing their goaltending, though. No?
Yeah, but it's funny because if you look at Korpisalo and Talbot, 2 guys who switched, one team is known for being a good defensive team, and look at their goalie numbers there. And then the other team, they not good defensively, and their goalie numbers are crap.
Yeah.
So,
and Philip Gustafson left there and then went to be really good in mini too.
Yeah. So I think it's more team defense in front and the number of quality chances they continually give up.
Well, okay. So to actually answer the question, to be an asshole.
I said Ottawa.
Yeah, but
you
said it in a different way. Which GM is facing the most pressure is actually what the question was.
Team that's facing the most pressure to win the offseason.
Yeah, Ottawa.
Gregor said Ottawa. I'll give him a good answer.
Okay, he gets points. But which GM is facing the most pressure? Steve Stais is the counter hasn't hit 1 year on his job, so I don't think he's facing pressure. Tom Fitzgerald, his team, there is some pressure, of course, to get back to the playoffs, but he's got a pretty good roster, so there's not as much sweating, I don't think. He's got foundational core pieces that we know are really good. I think it's Buffalo. Kevin Adams is in year 5 rebuilding the rebuild. That's a long time. I mean, we're talking about
13.
The longest drought in North American pro sports.
Yeah.
You're right. I think their defense core is immediately ready to compete. That top 4 is as good as anyone's out there. Power, Dahlin, Bowen Byram, and Samuelson. Love it. Like capital L, love it. But they need more goals, and they need steady influence in net. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen was that guy to the end of last season. By the way, needs a new contract. But they've got to make some moves to sit back this year. They can't do that again. Kevin Adams knows it. He addressed it. I actually talked about it point blank with him on the Frankly Speaking podcast a couple weeks ago. If you haven't listened, check it out. I thought it was a really forthright. I asked him exactly about facing the pressure that we're talking about, and he knows it's time. So I think it's got to be Buffalo. And by the way, you changed coaches again, and you went with maybe the most surprising hire of the offseason without actually conducting a search. That further adds to pressure.
Yeah, that Lindy Ruff move, I think if it doesn't work, that certainly cranks things up on Kevin Adams. All right, guys, that is a wrap on today's edition of Fill in the Blank, brought to you by Wendy.
Now, Frank, earlier you said which one of them doesn't belong. Were you suggesting New Jersey's not in the same as it?
Well, they've already made the playoffs and they've already won a round with this group. Think about how catastrophic some of the things that happened last year were. You lose Dougie Hamilton early in the season. He's your best defenseman in a year in which you talked about this before last season started. You said their defense is young and thin.
Yeah.
Okay, well, when you take out a $9 million defenseman for 3/4 of the season, on an already young and thin defense core, what do you expect? When you get way below league average goaltending, what do you expect? And also, by the way, Jack Hughes, it's kind of lost on people that through the first 20 games of the season, he was lapping the league. He was the clear Hart Trophy choice through 20 games of the year last year. He also missed chunks of the season due to injury. Like it was as bad as it could be for New Jersey. And the fact that we had some crazy playoff runs from Washington and some other teams, the Islanders, that came all the way back, and Pittsburgh was in it. The fact that we didn't even talk about New Jersey during that period of time is a true indictment of their season.
Oh, yeah. What's funny is if the last 3 years combined, the Sabres and Red Wings have 2 more losses than the Devils over a 3-year period, right? And like,
but
New
if you were
Jersey
to
had
pick a roster to start with from right now, and you got to be the GM of one of them, I know which one I'm picking.
See, my question in New Jersey is goaltending, right? I like the young goalie in Buffalo.
I think, but well, which one? Do you like him or Devin Levi?
Well, I like both, but I like Uka a little bit better right now. And as good as New Jersey's defense is, I think I would take Buffalo's top 4.
Oh, I know which defense I'd be taking, but which overall team? I'm taking Hughes, Heischer, Bratt, plus I think they're young defensemen. I think are studs. Hughes and Nemitz and
I really like Luke Hughes.
Whew. And now they got Seamus Casey to sign. Like I think you plug a goalie into the Devils, like I said, Tyler mentioned my prediction, anywhere in the range of 900 save percentage next year, and they are a stone cold mortal lock for the playoffs.
So which goalie are they getting?
Take your pick. I don't think it really matters which one. You could go Markstrom, you could go Ullmark, you could go Saros. If you really want to go nuts, I personally, the play I would make is not give up a ton of assets and get Philip Gustafsson from Mini. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
Between him and Jake Allen, who they traded for at the deadline, one more year at 1.9, like the two of them together should be totally fine. You get Allen 30 games and you get Gustafsson 50 games. Like, I don't see anything wrong with that.
No, I think Jake Allen gets a little bit underrated for what his cap hit's going to be and what he could play for them. I think that's going to end up being a very astute, give you goaltending depth move. It wasn't the big dog, right? That he's not. I don't think he's a starter, I'll say, but he could easily be a 1A, 1B.
But I think that was the most disappointing part of their season last year, is two kind of glaring issues that they had: goaltending and the coaching change. Like, they both came after you had already hit them in the head with a shovel and buried their season. Trading for a goalie at the deadline, it helped set you up for this year, but it should have been done in December when the Habs were carrying 3 guys and wanted to do it then.
Yeah.
They should have made the coaching change in right after the outdoor games. Like, it didn't need to go the way that it did.
Yeah, it's funny that those 3 teams again, and now you throw in New Jersey, are all battling for the.
We didn't even talk about the Wings.
Yeah. I don't know what to make of Detroit, man. Like, they had a good push, but really Detroit, I would argue, Frank, like you mentioned how you had the pushes of Washington. No team stubbed their toe repeatedly down the stretch more than the Red Wings. Like, all they had to do was play like 500, even 450 hockey, and they got in. And then they just tanked it down the stretch. That was brutal.
I just don't think they have the horses on defense. Remember we were talking a few weeks ago about my theory of you need at least 3?
Yeah.
You've got Mo Seider, who needs a new contract. And then I love Edvinson, who's coming. Like, he's apparently, from everyone I talked to, like, he is really freaking good. But then what?
I don't mind Jake Wallman. I think he's pretty decent. You're not a Wallman
he's
fan?
Overrated, but
no.
But
you're right. He's maybe not a clear, obvious third. That's fair.
But look at the rest of their defense. Like, who's getting it done for you? And by the
What
way,
about if
Gus
the
Despair had a good season, and he's going to market, it looks like.
I was just going to say, what if they re-sign the Ghost? Because if he's your
He
number
gave you
3 of your top 3
points, 56 points last year, and played a massive role down the stretch. He made some unbelievable plays.
Oh God, yeah, he was like, he's a really gifted, smart player.
But think about the Ghost, back from the dead.
Yes, healthy again.
His career was over 4 years ago. The Flyers had to trade an asset to get rid of him.
Yeah.
They had to give up a second-round pick and a 7th just to move off of his contract. That shows you not just the health was an issue, but the confidence was rattled. He's hit double-digit goals each of the last 3 years and has had at least 41 points every season.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. He's another great example for perseverance for anybody out there. When things are not looking good for you, look internal, believe in yourself, and good for him. And I'm curious what he gets in free agency, Frank, and where he goes. He's an intriguing guy to me.
It's probably going to be pretty good. It's probably going to be like 6 million plus.
Yeah. Wow. His numbers bared out. Like he can help a lot of teams because there's not a lot, like puck moving is still massive importance in today's NHL from your back end. And he does that exceptionally well. That wraps up episode 313 of the DFO Rundown, brought to you by Bet365, the largest sports betting platform globally. You can open an account at Bet365 and make sure to use the promo code DAILY365 on a huge range of markets, any sport, anytime. Hey, if you had DeChambeau, Frank, did you see that? Did you see Rory? Can we talk quickly before we leave? Did you see, I know it's Father's Day and maybe you were napping or not because you had brutal schedules traveling, but did you see Rory McIlroy on the 16th and the 18th holes, dude? Like, oh my, I'm telling you.
I caught the last 2 holes and I was scarred.
If you're a fan of the Dallas Mavericks or the Edmonton Oilers, you're like, see, there's always a chance.
I don't know.
Well, dude, did you both of those were inside 4 feet.
Yeah, I get it, but that also wasn't, it's not like, that was to force the playoff though. Right?
Well, after a ridiculous chip, right? By DeChambeau. That was one of the greatest chips.
It was one of the shots of his life.
Yeah. But if he makes those 2 putts, Frank, there is no playoff. Then he wins.
Yeah, I guess. But it's not like having a 3-0 lead in the Cup final. Like what we're talking about is if the Oilers somehow pulled it off, it would be the greatest comeback in the history of the sport. I'm sorry, it tops everything. It's only ever happened once in the final, and that was when there were 6 teams.
Yeah.
And this Panther team is legit. So if that were to happen, it's the greatest comeback in the history of the sport.
We'll see. Should be fun on Tuesday night, Frank. We'll discuss it. We're either talking game 6 or we're talking the off season.
Or we're talking top 6 of each of the 4 teams in the 4 nations.
I got mine. I'm ready to go. So there'll be some fun debates on that. So awesome. Have a good one, everyone. We'll chat with you later this week.